and welcome to Money Matters on TV360 Nigeria. I am Adeshewa Odushoga. The Nigeria's debt sustainability has erupted fresh debate from economists across Nigeria. This is following the approval of the House of Representatives to President Muhammadu Buhari's request to borrow foreign loans totaling $22.79 billion. Now, the president has said the funds were for 2020 budget deficit, financing of critical budgets, and some state of the federation. This fresh loan is part of the 2016 to 2018 federal government external borrowing ruling plan. Also, the president also got the approval of the Red Chambers to borrow another $5.5 billion from multilateral institutions as part of measures to finance its widening deficits currently put at 3 trillion naira. With the latest debt, Nigeria's total debt will be around 41.6 trillion naira, and earlier this year, a similar request was approved by the National Assembly amounting to $22.798 billion, which added to the 2019 year-end figure of 27.4 trillion naira. Now, there are growing concerns that Nigeria may be heading into a debt trap, which will clearly jeopardize Nigeria's economic recovery efforts post-COVID-19. We'll take a short break now and we'll be right back. Stay with us.
Corruption not in my country.
Madam. Madam, welcome. Okay. Madam, no worry. When you deliver the balance, we'll give you the goods.
No problem. No problem. All right, so now well done.
Thank you.
Hey, Oga, I still say she don't bring money. Maybe we'll use this one for him now.
She wants mahogany, not white wood.
Oga, our work now to join wood together, deliver whatever to customer. Put the remaining profit for pocket.
Abba, this is corruption, not in my country.
Corruption not in my country.
Stop corruption now.
Welcome back. Now, the major concern here has been speculations that all this borrowing may result in a debt crisis for the country. But economist Ken Ife says, contrary to the public opinion, that this is the best time to borrow.
We have to borrow. The reason is this. One, the two visions we have for Nigeria, Vision 2050, GDP of 6.4 trillion, 2030, 1.64 trillion. You can only go there if you are investing in infrastructure, if you are investing in productive capacity. So that's number one. The number two is you are borrowing 5.513 billion today. If you don't borrow this 5.513 billion today, if you have to save this money, it may take you 3 to 5 years to save this 5.5 billion before you invest it. And by the time you get to those 3 to 5 years, the money has doubled. The requirement for the job you are going to do is doubled. So it makes sense that you borrow it today rather than wait until you are able to save that money in 3 years' time. Okay, but the third thing is that you are borrowing it at a very concessionary rate, at a very, very low interest rate, which is from development finance institutions. And those ones are actually the one I push the government to go to, because you get a low, very concessionary rate between 0 and 2%. Much, much lower than 5 to 6% that you will get from bilateral lenders. Two, there is a kind of discipline around that lending, because they have an interest in making sure that due diligence is conducted on this lending and that the debt sustainability tests are carried out on this particular lending. So not only that you are working within the law to consign this to capital expenditure, but you are also not only creating jobs, and they will have role in monitoring and evaluation, because they have to monitor the milestones before they release the monies. So that is the way to go, because that brings some fiscal discipline on our expenditure. Even if you look at debt service as 2.68 trillion, that's again quite high, about 53% of government revenue. Normally you would expect 40%, international best practice is 40% of government revenue, but it is high. And that's the one that tends to go higher and higher, and could cause a fiscal stress if care is not taken. But I think we also need to look at the capital expenditure, which is 2.49 trillion, about 24 to 25% of our GDP, of our overall expenditure. Now, that's about the lowest of our administration. But there's a bit of comfort because we are getting quite a bit of external borrowing, which focuses on capital expenditure. So there could be some compensation from there. Otherwise, just based on that budget figure of 25%, it looks tight and the lowest for the administration.
Let's go on a short break now. Don't go away.
Corruption not in my country.
Madam, madam, welcome. Okay, madam, no worry. When you deliver the balance, we'll give you the goods.
No problem, no problem. All right, so now well done.
Thank you.
Hey, Oga, I still say she don't bring money. Maybe we use this one for him now.
She wants mahogany, not white wood.
Oga, our work now to join wood together, deliver whatever to customer. Put the remaining profit for pocket.
Abba, this is corruption, not in my country.
Corruption not in my country.
Stop corruption now.
Welcome back. Now joining me to discuss this further is the Director General of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Muda Yusuf, who will now be joining me via Skype. Thank you for joining us on the program, sir.
My pleasure.
Now, first, let me ask you, all these figures, how would you react to the federal government's borrowing trend?
Well, it's a very disturbing trend. Clearly, there is a major debt sustainability challenge here. Because, as you can see, the revenue of government has been dwindling on the back of the collapse of oil price and a lot of other macroeconomic factors. And unfortunately, the expenditure profile of government has not changed significantly. Even the budget review exercise that was done, there was no significant reduction in the budget size. So what we have seen is a dramatic increase in the deficit, which needs to be financed, which perhaps explains the increase in the tempo of borrowing. But clearly, when we relate the capacity to service the debt with the current level of debt, we know that we have a major debt sustainability problem. So we have a sustainability challenge as far as our debt profile is concerned.
Now, a recent report by the Federal Ministry of Finance, Budget and National Planning shows that Nigeria's debt service as a percentage of revenue is rising to 99% in the fourth quarter of 2020. This is quite a high rate if you ask me. Now, how would you react to this, 99%?
Well, that is a very disturbing figure. Of course, as the debt increases and as revenue collapses, the percentage that we spend on debt service will continue to increase. So we're almost at a point where the total revenue will be consumed by the debt service. That is what this figure is telling us. If you have maybe, for instance, 100 million or 100 million or 100 billion naira in revenue, that means that 99 billion will be spent on debt service. That is the implication in layman's terms. So it is a very frightening scenario. That means that for us to fund our regular expenditure in the budget, it has to come largely from borrowing. Because if almost the entire revenue is being spent on servicing debts, then practically there is nothing left for other expenses of government, be it recurrent or capital. So it's a very disturbing scenario, and unless we do something drastic on both sides, and when I say on both sides, I mean on both the revenue side and the expenditure side, we may be digging our hole into a much deeper crisis as far as debt is concerned.
Now, taking a glance at the revised 2020 budget now, we see that Nigeria's budget deficit will be over 4 trillion naira, considering the fact that the Debt Management Office had put the deficit at 4.563 trillion naira when the budget was still at 10.5 trillion. Now, a deficit that high, what is the implication, especially at this period?
Well, there are implications both for the present generation and also for the future generation. Currently, the implication is that practically all the funds that we have, we'll have to spend a lot on debt service. Because if the deficit is increasing, then there's a major pressure on government to service the debt. So the revenue that normally should have been used to develop infrastructure, to develop our hospitals, our educational system, the railway system, the road infrastructure, and all of that, a whole lot of that revenue will now be spent on servicing debt. Secondly, historically, we also have what we call the crowding out effect of borrowing, government borrowing, especially with respect to domestic debt. The more the government borrows in the financial market domestically, the more you have what you call the crowding out effect on the private sector credit. Because naturally, because the government borrowing is coming at a very low risk, so a lot of resources in the economy often gravitate towards these government borrowing instruments, namely the federal government bonds and the treasury bills. So if you have that kind of scenario, and if the interest remains attractive because the risk is lower, then it's going to deprive other sectors of the economy of credit, which is not good for the economy. Because at a time like this, we need all the stimuli that you can give to the private sector to be able to, come alive again, increase the tempo of economic activities, create more jobs, and all of that. Because a lot of sectors are down. So they need to be stimulated. And part of the ways you can stimulate is to ensure that you provide very generous credit to them. So if you have a situation where the bulk of the credit is now going to government, then that's a big problem for the private sector and a major challenge for the economy as well.
Now, with all of this borrowing, at what point can we say Nigeria is at the point of debt crisis? Or can we even say we are at the edge already?
Well, from all indications, we are there. Because if you have a situation where practically all your revenue you are using to service debts, then that is already a crisis situation. Although each time we engage with the authorities, they say, well, we don't have a debt problem, but we have a revenue problem. But you need revenue to service debt. If you don't have the revenue, then how do you service the debt? So we are already at the point of a crisis. And unless something drastic is done, either by ensuring proper reforms to ensure the reduction in the cost of governance, because that is a major issue. Because if you look at the recurrent expenditure as a percentage of total expenditure, it's over 80%. And with the scenario that we are seeing now, it's likely to even be close to 90%. So if you have that kind of structure of spending, that is not a good structure that can, lead to the reinvigoration of the economy. That's not the kind of structure that can improve on the capacity of the economy to be able to pay the debts. So it's a crisis situation that we are in. And I hope that if the government going forward is able to, introduce reforms. I've heard about the Rosai reports. The president has said it should be reviewed and possibly implemented. That is one way to look at it. We can also look at revenue generating agencies of government and ensure that they also, remit to government what they should normally remit to government. Because many of them are actually under-remitting. Many of them are carrying very high costs, which are avoidable. So we are looking at also the reform in the oil and gas sector. If we're able to government to exit the downstream sector, so all the government expenses on subsidy which runs into trillions of naira annually, I think that can also come as a savings. All the losses suffered by the refineries, that can come as a savings. So these are some of the things that we can do to ensure that we avert a more serious crisis as far as our debt management is concerned.
Now, talking about revenue, many have said that Nigeria has gotten a high sum of money, talking of the repatriation of the Abacha loot so far. And many are saying, why is the government not looking at, using this sum of money to fund some of its projects and not borrowing from outside? How would you react to this? Do you think the government should halt borrowing from, taking foreign loans now and use more of the funds repatriated from Abacha loot?
No, the amount repatriated generally from loot, including Abacha loot, I don't think is big enough to deal with the problem that we are faced with. And even apart from that, annually in the budget, there's a revenue head that is marked as recovery of loot. There's a revenue head in the budget, so it's already part of the budget. But the thing is that it's not that significant as to make a significant impact on the totality of the debt situation or the totality of our revenue. It's not so significant as a component. Symbolically, it is good, at least, that we are recovering some of these looted funds. It signals some commitment to anti-corruption and all of that. But in terms of the materiality, within the context of the problem of revenue and costs and deficit that we are dealing with, is not so material as to make any significant impact.
Okay. Finally, now looking at how badly affected Nigeria's economy has been owing to the effect of COVID-19, how fast do you think Nigeria can move back to what it was, or even better, post-COVID-19?
Well, it will take some time. I believe that for the rest of this year, we'll be grappling with this problem. We hope that by early next year, the economy can begin to recover. At that point, I expect some of the sectors on down will have been eased. Our businesses can resume in the hospitality industry, in the entertainment sector. The travel restriction will have been eased, hopefully, by the end of the year. So if you have that, then the domestic economic activities can regain some momentum. Once that begins to happen, the economy begins to regain some balance. So it will take at least between now and early next year for the economy to find its bearing. And globally, if things, if a lot of countries are now beginning to reactivate their economic activities, if that is sustained, and if there is no further spread or increase in the cases of those who are infected by the COVID-19 virus, then we expect that that will impact on global oil price. And if that happens, then that will also impact positively on our economy. That again can also aid the recovery of the economy. So it's both a domestic factor and also an external factor. If these two factors work favorably in the next couple of months, maybe in the next 6 months, then the economy can begin to find its bearing.
And now, what do you think could be the take-home lessons? I mean, Nigeria was fighting revenue crisis. Now we have debt crisis. And also, the Minister of Finance had said that Nigeria would definitely sink into recession. Now, this is coming amidst the pandemic, the negative effects of the pandemic. What do you think is the take-home lesson for Nigeria to avoid issues like this in years to come? That's, God forbid, if we have another pandemic.
Well, the lesson in all of this is that we need to strengthen our economy, to be better diversified, to be less dependent on a single product. We need to strengthen the capacity of the economy to produce and less dependent on imports. We need to promote self-reliance. We need to ensure that we focus on industries that have very good linkages within the economy and that have very good multiplier effects in the economy. If we're able to deal with that, I think the economy will be much more stable are much more robust to withstand any of these shocks. Because the challenge we face now is that we don't have the capacity to absorb shocks. So if we do that, and also in addition, if we also undertake the right kind of reforms, like the oil and gas sector reform, like the PIB, like the reform around even our federation, the issue of restructuring, so that the states can become much more stronger and less dependent on the center. We also reform the way we fund our infrastructure in a way that we are able to allow a better space for private sector investment in infrastructure. I'm sure that all of these things will help to build an economy that is much more sustainable than what we have now.
Mr. Muda Yusuf, thank you very much for joining us on the program.
Thank you.
And that's it on the program. Many thanks for watching. To watch us again, it's simple. Just visit our YouTube channel at TV360 Nigeria and across all our social media platforms. I am Adeshewa Odushoga. Bye for now.